All right, this time we're going to look at the MLA Works Cited entries. As you identify the sources for your working bibliography, you want to go ahead and create that perfect MLA Works Cited entry. And so I'm going to go over the core elements of that, pretty much everything you need to know to create those, especially for the popular sources as you identify those. Now here are the elements of your citation. They come in this order, and if you'll notice, you can refer back to this as for where the punctuation goes, although you have lots and lots of examples of all of these different kinds of entries in the little seagull. But basically they work out this way. You begin with the authors, or multiple authors, then there's a period, then comes the title of the source, another period, and then comes what MLA calls the container. This could be the website, it could be the magazine it appears in, or the newspaper, it could be an academic journal, it could be a collection of short stories, or even a record album. So you might think of it in something like that. The song would be the title of the source, the name of the album would be the container. All right, but for the most part, it's the publication or the website. There's a comma. If necessary, you include some additional information like other contributors, editors, or translators. I'll talk about that briefly. And then if there is a version, you include that. By version, they mean something like second edition. Then comes the number. You'll see that quite often, especially with popular or scholarly sources. Then information about the publisher, the publication date, and then the location. So there really is only 3 periods. That last group contains a string of commas, but you don't include all of that information. You definitely look for the author, title, container, publication, publisher, publication date, and the location. And this is really just the URL. Okay. So for author, if it's one author, it's pretty simple. You include the last name, comma, then the first name. So the American novelist Toni Morrison is Morrison, comma, Toni. If you have 2 authors, you include them in the order they appear in the publication. The first name is done last name first. So Andrea Lunsford will become Lunsford, comma, Andrea, another comma, and then Lisa Eddy, the co-author. If there are 3 or more authors, then you only include the first one, done in last name first. So Stephen Greenblatt and let's say the 4 other authors of the book would end up just being Greenblatt, Stephen, comma, et al. Notice the way this abbreviation is done. Et is the Latin word for and. All is an abbreviation for others in Latin, so et al. Period. That period doing double duty there. So that's how we handle authors' names. If there is no author's name, the first thing in your citation should be the title. Now, if there is an author's name, the second thing will be the title of the source. Now, you might think of this, again, as the title and the container. We're talking about the title here. So this would be the smaller work, chapters of a book, articles in a journal, stories in a collection of short stories. Poems, songs, web pages, these sort of things appear in a bigger work, a container. So they go in quotation marks. So there are 2 kinds of titles. Titles that get quotation marks, titles that get italics. Very, very, very rarely are you going to use both with a title. In fact, we'll just right now pretend that never happens except in the rare case where it might show up. So Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, we might find that in a collection of King's writings. So it would be that title of the work going in the quotation marks. Redefining Reading, the Impact of Digital Communication Media. That's a kind of journal title you'll commonly see. So that title goes in quotation marks. There's a colon that separates kind of the topic with the position here, or the outcome of it. If there is a colon near the title, the next letter after the colon is capitalized, regardless of what the word is. All right. So in your titles, you always capitalize the first and last word and the first word after a colon. So letter, jail, redefining media, those words are going to be capitalized. The here is capitalized. Then within the title, the only words that are not capitalized fall into really these 2 categories, or really 3 categories. There's articles, A, N, and the. again, unless it's the first word of the title or follows a colon. Prepositions like in, of, before, between, after, during, etc. Or the conjunctions and, but, for, so, or, nor, or yet. So you'll see in this, we'll see in subtitle up here, the preposition from is not capitalized. The preposition of is not capitalized. The other words, of course, are. All verbs, even little words like is and was, are capitalized because of the type of word they are. Now comes the, another title of your source, the bigger works. If you're quoting the full work, say a book or a film or a periodical, if you're looking at the entire website, those titles appear in italics. So the novel, The Sound of the Fury, the film, Black Panther, the scholarly journal, Journal of Social Work, magazine, Sports Illustrated, newspaper, Washington Post, the website, WebMD. These kinds of titles are italicized. So if you're including the title and the container, it looks like this. Here, the reading brain differences between digital and print is the journal title, or the article title, the name of the journal it appears in, so many books, or perhaps this is a chapter of that book. That container goes in italics. Here's a newspaper article that goes in quotation marks, New York Times, the container is italicized. An encyclopedia entry, Californian, the actual is contained in the New Columbia Encyclopedia, quotation marks, then italics. Now, in some cases, you do have other contributors. This probably will be rare in the case of the kinds of articles you're finding for the working bibliography assignment. This is more likely to occur in books. So here, the other contributor is the editor, Jeffrey Nunberg. We're quoting here just the one article, Toward Meta Reading by Patrick Bazin. It appears in this book, but Nunberg then is a contributor to the book, so that information would go here. In the case of the novel Emma, edited by Stephen M. Parrish, he's the other contributor. Jane Austen is still the author of the book. Dostoevsky is the author of Crime and Punishment. The translators, or in this particular case, translators, these two folks go after the title of the container. Now, with version, that might be something, as I said before, like second edition, or maybe King James Version, if you're quoting a biblical source, unabridged version, director's cut, etc., or other ways that you might define that. Again, rarely is that going to come up in the kind of sources we're looking for this next article. Now, volume number could be something like volume 1, in the case of a book that appears in more than one form. In journal articles, each year is a kind of volume. So the PMLA, the Papers of the Modern Language Association, is the journal. Every year they have their articles that appear are collected in one volume. So volume 128, the next year would be volume 129. Number is the number of publication within that volume. So that's what we mean really when we're talking about number. And I guess date. So for a publisher, for a book, something like W.W. Norton, you don't include incorporated or publishing or company. So as you're working on the ebooks for the second part of the bibliography, then keep that in mind. For books that are published by a university press, the words university and press are abbreviated. U for university, P for press, in whatever form they occur. So Princeton University Press would appear as Princeton UP. The University of California Press would be U of California P. You'll see you would have the U of North Carolina P or the U of Virginia P. So this is very, very common. Many of the large, especially research universities, have their own publishing wing that publishes scholarly books in particular. So that UP or U of something P is very common in that case. And again, both of these apply for books. Now, after the publisher comes the year of publication, and that's just, again, the year, Norton 2013. Then for periodicals, or newspapers or journals, you would include the month, date, year if it's given. You abbreviate all the months except for May, June, and July. Use the 3-month abbreviation for all of them except for September. I don't know why. That's just MLA. Maybe they'll fix it 1 year. But Jan, Feb, Mar, Ap, Sept, Oct, Nov, and Dec are the abbreviations for the months. And you write the dates out in MLA style. This is kind of the international way of recording dates. The day of the month, the name of the month, and the year. Just the abbreviation. There are no commas separating these things. Now, for online sources, well, sometimes it's kind of tricky to find out. Normally what you do, if often a date is given at the top. So here's an article by Olga Kazan, a writer for The Atlantic, Forgetting and Remembering Your First Language. And at the top of the article, where the title and her name appear, is the date of publication, 24 July 2014. After that, then would come the URL, and you could include an access date, the date that it was accessed. So after the URL would go a period, and then one item that MLA suggests you add then is the date you accessed it. This is in part to kind of protect you in case what appears in the article changes, because that's the one thing about things on the web. They can often disappear or change. So if you indicate this is the date it was accessed, then that's the version you used. If no date is given at the top, then probably what you need to do is scroll to the bottom and find a copyright date in some of the information at the bottom of the page. And you'll see this for nearly all web pages. So in the case of painkillers and opioid use disorder, WebMD, this is a great source of factual information. There's no author for it, so you see I begin with the title, the web page title in quotation marks, then the name of the website, find 2018 as the publication date. When I found it, then comes the URL. Now, for websites, it is recommended that you include the URL, but first you omit the http:// part of it. Again, that's one of the recommendations. If it comes from a database, again, we'll talk more about finding scholarly sources in the database, but if you do use ProQuest to find some of the popular sources, and this one, The Future of the Will Be Quiet in the Atlantic, would certainly be a popular source that can be located through ProQuest, then you would include that original publication information. This is sort of the print version of it, and then ProQuest is the database, that's italicized, and then the URL is included for that, followed by the access date. I'll mention this week and then talk about it again next week when we talk about scholarly sources. Sometimes sources are given a DOI. This is a digital object identifier number. So this is a number exclusive to this article. And so it's identified as the DOI or DOI number. So in this particular case, we'd include all the information as we've done before, but instead of including the URL, we just include that DOI number. And it's what identifies that source. So I could go to ProQuest, type in this number, go directly to the article. So I don't need all the other web URL business. You do edit this DOI number out by taking all of this information out. So that just goes DOI : to the 10. The 10 will always be the first number in the DOI. So the format for your working bibliography will look like this. At the top, you'll have, after your name, other identifying information, working bibliography centered, and then the research question. In this particular case, should congressional districts be created by independent commissions? Is a type of research question. You were sent your research question. You were each assigned an individual one. Then you separate the subjects. You probably do these in alphabetical order. It makes sense. The books and ebooks first is a heading. Then you would list the 5 or so of those. Popular sources, list the 5 or so of those, and then the scholarly sources. All right. So that's